My name is Evelyn Brooks. I am 72 years old. For 43 years, I taught children how to see the world through watercolors and soft charcoal lines. I believed that beauty could heal anything, that silence was kindness, that keeping the peace was the same as keeping love alive. I was wrong. My house has always smelled like chamomile tea and old books with yellow pages, the kind of smell that makes people feel safe. I raised 3 children in a small cottage near the coast, far from the grand Victorian mansion where I grew up. I chose distance on purpose. I chose smallness. I thought that if I made my life quiet enough, the past would stay buried. But the past does not stay buried. It waits. It was a Saturday morning in late September when my grandson, Charlie, called me. He is 12. He has his father's eyes and his mother's curiosity. He was helping his dad clean out the old family estate in Savannah, the house that once belonged to my parents, then to me, and now to my eldest son, Daniel. Charlie's voice was bright with discovery. "Grandma, I found something in the basement. It's this really old camera. Like, ancient. Can we get it fixed? I want to see if there's anything on it." I felt something tighten in my chest, a small, cold knot, but I smiled through the phone. "Of course, sweetheart. Bring it to me next weekend." When he arrived, the camera was heavier than I remembered. It was a Super 8, the kind my father used in the 70s. The leather strap was cracked. The lens was foggy with age. I held it in my hands and felt the weight of all the years I had tried to forget. Charlie watched me with wide eyes. "Do you think there's film inside?" I did not answer right away. I was listening to something deeper than his question. A whisper in my memory. A door closing softly in the dark. "Maybe," I said finally. "Let's find out." I took the camera to a small repair shop on the edge of town, the kind of place that still develops old film and fixes broken things people cannot bear to throw away. The man behind the counter was young, with kind eyes and careful hands. His name was Marcus. "This might take a few days," he said, turning the camera over gently. "If there's film inside, it'll be fragile. I'll have to transfer it digitally." I nodded. I did not tell him I was afraid of what he might find. 3 days later, Marcus called. His voice was different, quiet, strained. "Mrs. Brooks, could you come to the shop? Today, if possible? Is the camera ready?" There was a pause. Too long. "Yes, but I need to show you something first, in person." When I arrived, the shop was empty. Marcus locked the door behind me. He led me to a small back room with a computer screen glowing in the dim light. He did not look at me when he spoke. "I restored the footage," he said softly. "But Mrs. Brooks, this is not normal home video." He pressed play. The screen filled with the image of a grand room, dark wood paneling, a chandelier, a long dining table. I recognized it immediately. It was the house in Savannah, my childhood home. Then I saw him, my father, tall, composed, dressed in a gray suit. He was speaking to someone off camera. His voice was calm, too calm. And then I saw the fear in someone else's eyes. Marcus paused the video. He turned to me with a look I will never forget. Not pity, not shock, something worse, certainty. "Mrs. Brooks," he said quietly, "this footage, it shows something that should not have happened in any home. I think we need to call the police." I stared at the frozen image on the screen. My father's face, that house, that silence I had carried for so long. And for the first time in 40 years, I let myself remember what I had been taught to forget. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, holding a cup of tea that went cold in my hands. The moon was full. It cast long shadows across the walls, and I remembered how much I used to fear those shadows when I was a child. The house in Savannah was built in 1873. My grandfather bought it after the war. It had 12 rooms, 3 floors, and a basement that smelled like damp earth and old secrets. My mother loved that house. She polished the silver every Sunday. She arranged fresh flowers in every room. She smiled at guests and served them tea on porcelain plates that had belonged to her grandmother. But my mother never went down to the basement. Not once. Not in all the years I lived there. I was 7 years old the first time I asked why. "Because some places are not meant for ladies," she said, smoothing my hair with her soft hand. "Your father takes care of things down there. We take care of things up here." I believed her. I believed everything she told me. That was what good daughters did. My father was a lawyer, a respected man. He had a deep voice and a firm handshake. People in town called him Sir. They stepped aside when he walked down the street. He never raised his voice at home. He never had to. His silence was louder than any shout. Daniel, my eldest son, was born in that house. I was 23. I had married young to a kind man named Robert who worked at the bank. We lived with my parents for the first 2 years of our marriage because my father insisted. He said it was tradition. He said family should stay together. I did not argue. I had learned not to argue. Robert tried once. He asked my father if we could move into our own place. Just a small apartment in town. Something simple. My father looked at him across the dinner table and said, "A man who cannot provide for his wife under his own roof is not yet ready to lead a family." Robert never asked again. Daniel was a quiet baby. He rarely cried. Even as a toddler, he seemed to understand that the house required silence. He would sit on the floor of the parlor, playing with wooden blocks, and he would glance toward the basement door whenever my father's footsteps echoed on the stairs. I told myself he was just listening. Children listen. But now, I wonder if he was afraid. Marcus had asked me if I wanted to watch the rest of the footage before calling the police. I said no. I could not bear it. Not yet. But I knew I would have to. I knew the truth was waiting for me, patient and unmovable, like a stone at the bottom of a well. I called Daniel that morning. He answered on the third ring. His voice was steady, professional. He always sounded like my father when he answered the phone. "Mom, is everything okay?" "I need to talk to you," I said. "About the house." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. "What about it?" "Charlie found a camera in the basement, an old Super 8. I had it restored." The silence stretched long between us. I could feel him choosing his words carefully. "And? There's footage on it, Daniel. From when you were a baby, from when we all lived there." "Mom, that's just old family videos. Why does that matter?" I closed my eyes. I thought of the image frozen on Marcus's screen, my father's face, the fear in someone else's eyes. "Because it's not just family videos," I said quietly. "There's something else on it, something I never knew was there." Another silence, longer this time. "What did you see?" His voice was colder now, guarded. "I don't know yet, but the man who restored it thinks we should call the police." Daniel exhaled sharply. I heard something fall in the background. A glass, maybe, or a book. "Don't do that," he said. "Don't call anyone, not until we talk. I'm coming over tonight." "Daniel," I said, "I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there." He hung up before I could answer. I stood in my kitchen, holding the silent phone, and I realized something I had spent my whole life avoiding. My son was not surprised. He was not confused. He was not asking me what I had seen. He already knew, and that meant he had always known. I thought of all the times Daniel had insisted on keeping the house, even after my father died, even after my mother followed him 6 months later, even after I begged him to sell it and let the past go. He had refused. He said it was our heritage, our legacy. He said we owed it to the family to preserve it. But now I understood. He was not preserving a legacy. He was guarding a secret. And I had helped him do it by staying silent all these years. The tea in my cup was ice cold. I poured it into the sink and watched it swirl down the drain. I thought about all the things I had taught my students over the years. How to see light and shadow. How to blend colors until they became something new. How to find beauty even in broken things. But I had never taught them the most important lesson. The one I was only now beginning to learn. That sometimes the only way to create something beautiful is to first destroy what is false. Daniel arrived at 7 o'clock that evening. He did not knock. He used his key, the one I had given him years ago for emergencies. I heard the door open and close with a soft, deliberate click. He stood in the hallway for a moment before coming into the kitchen where I sat waiting. He looked older than I remembered. 49 years old, but the lines around his eyes were deep. His hair had more gray than brown now. He wore a dark suit even though it was Saturday. He always wore suits, even at family dinners, even at the beach. He sat down across from me without taking off his coat. "Where's the footage?" he asked. Not hello, not how are you, just the question. "At the repair shop," I said. I haven't watched all of it yet. His jaw tightened. Did you make copies? No. Good. He leaned back in his chair. His hands were flat on the table, fingers spread wide. My father used to sit the same way. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever you think you saw on that camera, you need to let it go. Let it go? My voice was steadier than I expected. Daniel, the man who restored it said we should call the police. That's not something you just let go. Marcus doesn't know what he's talking about. He saw a few minutes of old footage and jumped to conclusions. What conclusions? I asked quietly. What exactly did he see that made him say that? Daniel looked away. His eyes moved to the window where the last light of evening was fading into blue darkness. Old footage can look worse than it was. Things were different back then. Discipline, authority, it wasn't abuse, it was just how things were done. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. Abuse. He had said it before I did. What was done, Daniel? My hands were shaking now. I pressed them flat against the table to steady them. What happened in that house? Nothing that concerns you now. His voice was sharp, final. Grandfather is dead. Grandmother is dead. Whatever happened is buried with them. There's no reason to drag it all up now and destroy everything we've built. Everything we've built, I repeated slowly. Or everything we've hidden? He stood up abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor. I'm trying to protect you, Mom. I'm trying to protect all of us. If you take that footage to the police, they'll investigate. They'll tear apart the family name. They'll dig through everything. And for what? To punish dead people? Maybe it's not about punishment, I said. Maybe it's about truth. Daniel laughed. It was a cold sound, hollow. Truth doesn't help anyone. Truth just makes people feel righteous while they destroy the lives of everyone around them. He turned toward the door, then stopped. His hand rested on the doorframe. He did not look at me when he spoke again. I was 5 years old when I first went down to that basement with Grandfather. Do you remember that, Mom? My breath caught. No. Of course you don't. You were upstairs with Grandmother, arranging flowers or folding linens or doing whatever it was you did to stay out of his way. His voice was quiet now, distant. He told me it was time I learned what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be strong, to not cry, to not be weak like other boys. I felt something break inside my chest, a small, sharp crack. Daniel! He locked the door, he continued, still not looking at me. There was a chair in the corner, a leather strap hanging on the wall. He said every Brooks man had sat in that chair. His father, his grandfather, all the way back. He said it was tradition, that it made us better, harder, worthy of the name. Tears were running down my face now, but I could not speak. I could not move. And do you know what you did, Mom? He turned then, and his eyes were full of something I had never seen before. Not anger, not hate, something worse. Resignation. You did nothing. You heard me crying through the floorboards and you turned up the radio. You hummed along to old songs and pretended everything was fine. I didn't know. My voice broke. I didn't know what was happening down there. Yes, you did. His words were soft, certain. You just chose not to see it. Because seeing it would have meant doing something, and doing something would have meant standing up to him, and you were never going to do that. He walked to the door, then paused one last time. Leave the footage where it is. Don't watch the rest. Don't call the police. Let the dead stay dead, Mom. It's better for everyone. Then he was gone. The door closed quietly behind him. I sat alone in my kitchen, listening to the sound of his car pulling away, and I realized something terrible. My son was right. I had known. Not the details, perhaps. Not the specifics. But I had known that something was wrong in that house. I had felt it in the way my father's footsteps sounded on the basement stairs, in the way my mother never sang when he was home, in the way Daniel grew quieter every year, more distant, more like the man who had broken him. And I had done nothing. I had painted watercolors and taught children about beauty and kept my voice soft and my questions unasked. I had believed that if I stayed small enough, kind enough, quiet enough, the darkness would leave me alone. But darkness does not leave you alone when you ignore it. It grows, it spreads, it waits until you are ready to see it, and then it shows you everything you spent your life trying not to know. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but I walked to the phone anyway. I picked up the receiver. I dialed Marcus's number. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Brooks, I need to see the rest of the footage, I said. All of it, tomorrow morning. There was a pause, then gently. Are you sure? No, I whispered, but I need to see it anyway. I did not tell anyone where I was going the next morning. I left my phone on the kitchen counter. I drove to Marcus's shop in silence, with the windows down and the cold air stinging my face. The streets were empty. It was Sunday. Most people were at church or still asleep in their warm beds. I envied them. Marcus was waiting for me when I arrived. He had made coffee. The shop smelled like burnt beans and old paper. He locked the door behind me again, and we walked to the back room without speaking. The computer was already on. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. Before we start, Marcus said quietly, I want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. I can call someone, a counselor, a friend, anyone you want. I shook my head. I've been alone with this my whole life. One more day won't matter. He nodded slowly. He pulled up a chair for me, then sat down at the computer. His hand hovered over the mouse. There are 4 recordings, he said. The first one is what I showed you before. The others are worse. Worse how? He did not answer right away. He looked at me with those kind, careful eyes, and I saw something in them I had not noticed before. He had already seen what I was about to see. He had already carried this weight for 3 days, waiting for me to be ready. They're systematic, he said finally. Planned, recorded intentionally. This wasn't accidental footage, Mrs. Brooks. Someone wanted to document what was happening. My throat tightened. Who? Your father, I think. He's the only one who ever speaks on camera. He's always in control, always instructing. The word made my stomach turn. Marcus clicked play. The first recording was dated June 1976. The quality was grainy, but I could see the basement clearly now. The stone walls, the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, the wooden chair in the center of the room, and my father standing beside it, holding a leather strap. There was a boy sitting in the chair, small, maybe 6 years old, dark hair, thin shoulders. He was not crying, but his hands were gripping the arms of the chair so tightly his knuckles were white. It was Daniel. My father's voice came through the speaker, calm and measured. A man does not flinch. A man does not beg. A man endures what must be endured and becomes stronger for it. Do you understand, Daniel? Daniel nodded. His lips were pressed together. His eyes were fixed on the floor. Good. Then we begin. I closed my eyes, but I could not close my ears. I heard the sound of the strap cutting through the air. I heard the sharp, muffled gasp that Daniel could not hold back. I heard my father counting. 1, 2, 3. Stop, I whispered. Please stop. Marcus paused the video immediately. I opened my eyes and saw him watching me with deep concern. There's more, he said gently. 3 more recordings, all from different years, all with Daniel. How old is he in the last one? 12, maybe. 13. 7 years. 7 years of this. And I had been upstairs the entire time, humming to the radio and pretending everything was fine. Is there anyone else in the videos? I asked. My voice sounded hollow, distant. Marcus hesitated. In the 3rd video, there's a woman. She comes down the stairs at the end. She doesn't speak, but she watches. Who is she? I don't know. She's older. Gray hair. She just stands there while your father puts the strap away. Then she leaves. My mother. She had known too. We had all known. I pressed my hands against my face. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. I wanted to go back in time and break down that basement door and take my son away from that house and that man and that terrible, suffocating silence. But I could not. All I could do was sit in that small room and face what I had spent 40 years avoiding. Mrs. Brooks, Marcus said softly, we need to report this. Even if your father is gone, this needs to be documented. There might be others, other families, other children. Others? I looked up at him. What do you mean? He clicked to the 4th video. The date read August 1979. The basement again. The same chair, the same light bulb. But this time, there were 2 boys. Daniel was there, standing in the corner, watching. And in the chair was someone else. A boy I did not recognize. Blonde hair, freckles, maybe 9 years old. My father's voice again, that same calm, instructional tone. Daniel has learned well. Now it is your turn to learn. Your father asked me to help you become strong, to teach you what weakness costs. The blonde boy was crying, shaking. I want to go home. Please, I want my mom. Your mother sent you here because she loves you, because she wants you to be better than you are. I felt bile rise in my throat. Who is that child? Marcus shook his head. I don't know. But if your father was doing this to other people's children, then this is bigger than just your family. I stared at the screen, at the terrified face of a boy whose name I did not know, a boy whose mother had trusted my father, a boy who had been sent into that basement and had never told anyone what happened there. How many others had there been? How many silent, suffering children had my father broken in the name of tradition and strength, and whatever twisted logic he used to justify the darkness in his soul? Call the police, I said. My voice was steady now, clear. Call them right now. Marcus nodded. He picked up his phone, but before he could dial, I stopped him. Wait. He looked at me, confused. I need to call Daniel first. He needs to hear this from me. He needs to know that I'm choosing the truth this time, that I'm not going to stay silent anymore. Marcus handed me his phone. I dialed Daniel's number with shaking hands. He answered immediately. Mom? I watched the footage, I said. All of it. Silence. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. I'm so sorry I looked away, but I'm not looking away anymore. I'm calling the police. They need to see what he did. Mom, please. There's another boy in one of the videos. Someone I don't recognize. That means there were others, Daniel. Other children he hurt. And they deserve to know the truth, too. His breathing was ragged now. I could hear him trying to hold himself together. If you do this, he said quietly, everything changes. The family, the name, everything we are. Good, I whispered, because everything we are was built on a lie. I hung up before he could respond. I handed the phone back to Marcus. Make the call, I said. And as he dialed, I sat in that small, dim room and felt something I had not felt in 40 years. Relief. The police arrived within the hour. 2 detectives, a man and a woman. They introduced themselves, but I cannot remember their names now. Everything from that morning exists in my memory like fog, thick and unclear, except for a few sharp details that cut through. The woman detective had kind eyes. She sat next to me while Marcus showed them the footage. She did not ask me to watch it again. She just held a notepad in her lap and wrote things down in careful, precise handwriting. The man stood behind us, arms crossed, watching the screen without expression. When the 4th video finished, the one with the blonde boy, he exhaled slowly and looked at Marcus. How long have you had this footage? 3 days, Marcus said. Mrs. Brooks brought the camera in on Thursday. I called her as soon as I saw what was on it. The woman detective turned to me. Mrs. Brooks, can you identify the children in these recordings? The first 3 are my son Daniel. He's 49 now. The 4th, I don't know who that boy is. I've never seen him before. And the man in the videos? My father, Lawrence Brooks. He died in 2006. She wrote that down. And your mother? Was she aware of what was happening? I thought of the 3rd video. The gray-haired woman standing at the bottom of the stairs, watching in silence. Yes, she knew. Is she still alive? No. She died 6 months after my father. Heart failure. The detective nodded slowly. She closed her notepad and looked at me with something close to compassion. Mrs. Brooks, I know this is incredibly difficult, but we're going to need to speak with your son, and we're going to need to try to identify the other child in that 4th video. Do you have any idea who he might be? A neighbor? A family friend? I shook my head. My father knew a lot of people. He was a lawyer. He had colleagues, clients, men from his club. Any of them could have asked him for help with their sons. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Help. That was what they would have called it. Discipline. Correction. Making boys into men. All those clean, polite words that hid the truth of what my father had done in that basement. The male detective spoke for the first time. His voice was firm, but not unkind. We'll need to take the camera and the footage as evidence. We'll also need to search the property in Savannah. If there are other recordings, other documents, we need to find them. My son owns that house now, I said. Daniel. He lives there with his wife and children. We'll contact him. But Mrs. Brooks, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. He leaned forward slightly. Did your father ever harm you? Or anyone else in the family, besides your son? I thought about that question for a long time. I thought about all the years I had lived in that house, all the times my father had corrected me with a look, all the times my mother had smoothed things over with silence and tea and flowers, all the times I had felt small and powerless and afraid without ever understanding why. Not physically, I said finally, but he taught us all to be silent, to obey, to never question him. My mother, my brothers, me, we all learned that his word was law, that crossing him had consequences. The woman detective wrote that down. Do you know where your brothers are now? James lives in Oregon. He's a carpenter. We haven't spoken in 15 years. Thomas died in 1993. Car accident. He was drunk. She looked up at me. I'm sorry. I nodded. I had long ago stopped believing that Thomas's death was truly an accident. He had been drinking since he was 16. He had married 3 times and left each wife without explanation. He had worked a dozen jobs and never kept any of them for more than a year. He had been running from something his whole life, and eventually, he had run straight into a tree on a dark country road. Now I knew what he had been running from. The detectives left with the camera and the footage. They gave me a card with a phone number. They told me someone would be in touch within a few days. They told me I had done the right thing. I did not feel like I had done the right thing. I felt like I had set fire to my own life. Marcus walked me to my car. The morning sun was bright now, almost painfully so. Everything looked too sharp, too clear. Are you going to be okay? He asked. I thought about that question. I don't know. But I think that's the most honest I've been in a very long time. He smiled sadly. If you need anything, someone to talk to, or just a quiet place to sit, you can come back here any time. I thanked him and drove home. The streets were full of people now. Families walking to brunch, children riding bicycles, couples holding hands. The world was continuing as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. When I pulled into my driveway, Daniel's car was parked in front of my house. He was sitting on my porch steps, waiting. He stood when he saw me. I got out of my car slowly. We looked at each other across the distance of my small front yard. He was crying. I had not seen my son cry since he was 5 years old. They called me, he said. His voice was thick, broken. The police. They're coming to search the house tomorrow morning. I know. Mom, they're going to find things, papers, records, maybe more footage. He kept everything. He documented everything like it was something to be proud of. I walked toward him. I stopped a few feet away. Then let them find it. Let them see what he was. Let the truth come out. The truth is going to destroy us, Daniel whispered. My job, my reputation. My children are going to know that their great-grandfather was a monster, that their father was his victim, that their grandmother knew and did nothing. I know, I said quietly, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. But Daniel, there's another boy in that footage, a child I don't know, and if we stay silent, he'll never know that someone finally saw what happened to him. He'll never know that it wasn't his fault, that he wasn't alone. Daniel covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. He was taller than me now, broader, stronger. But in that moment, he felt small, fragile, like the boy I should have protected 40 years ago. I'm sorry, I whispered into his shoulder. I'm so sorry. He held on to me and sobbed, and for the first time in decades, I let myself cry with him. We stood there on my porch, 2 broken people trying to hold each other up, while the sun climbed higher in the sky and the world kept turning. And I realized something in that moment, something I should have understood years ago. The truth does not destroy us. Lies do. Silence does. Fear does. The truth just shows us what was always there, waiting to be seen. We sat together in my kitchen for hours that afternoon, Daniel and I. We did not speak much at first. I made tea that neither of us drank. I set out cookies that neither of us touched. We simply existed in the same space, breathing the same air, finally acknowledging the weight we had both been carrying alone. Eventually, Daniel began to talk. Not about the basement. Not yet. He started with smaller things, safer things. He told me about a recurring dream he had been having since childhood. In the dream, he is standing at the top of the basement stairs, and he can hear my voice calling him from somewhere far away. He tries to run toward my voice, but his legs will not move. He tries to call back, but no sound comes out. And then he feels a hand on his shoulder, firm and cold, and he knows without looking that it is my father's hand, and that he is being pulled backward, down into the dark. I've had that dream at least once a month for 40 years, Daniel said quietly. He was staring at his hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. Sometimes, more often. After Charlie was born, I had it almost every night. I would wake up in a panic, and I would go to his room just to make sure he was safe, just to make sure I hadn't somehow passed it on to him. My throat tightened. Passed what on? The violence, the anger, the wrongness. He looked up at me then, and his eyes were red and raw. Mom, I've spent my entire adult life terrified that I would become him, that one day I would look at my own son and feel the need to hurt him, to break him down and rebuild him into something harder, something colder. But you didn't, I said softly. You're nothing like him, Daniel. How do you know? His voice cracked. How do you know that I'm not just better at hiding it? That's what he did, wasn't it? He smiled at strangers. He shook hands at church. He was respected, admired, and behind closed doors, he was a monster. I reached across the table and took his hand. It was warm and rough and real. I know because I've watched you with your children. I've seen the way you are with Charlie, the way you listen to him, the way you let him be soft and curious and exactly who he is. You didn't learn that from your grandfather. You learned that despite him. Daniel closed his eyes. Tears ran down his face in silent streams. I kept the house because I thought if I could control it, if I could own it and live in it and fill it with normal, happy memories, then maybe I could erase what happened there. Maybe I could prove that it didn't define me, that I was stronger than the past. But you can't erase it, I said gently. None of us can. All we can do is face it and decide what we do next. He nodded slowly. The police asked me about other children, other boys who might have been brought to the house. I told them I didn't know, but that's not entirely true. I felt my heart skip. What do you mean? I was young, maybe 8 or 9. I remember there was a boy from my school. His name was Peter Lawson. His father worked with grandfather at the firm. One day, Peter stopped coming to school. When he came back 2 weeks later, he wouldn't talk to anyone. He sat alone at lunch. He flinched every time a teacher called on him. I remember thinking that he looked the way I felt. Did you ever ask him what happened? No, I was too afraid. Because if I asked him, I would have to admit that I knew. And if I admitted that I knew, then I would have to do something about it. So I stayed quiet, just like everyone else in that house. I thought about Peter Lawson, a boy I had never met, a boy whose name I had never heard until this moment. A boy who had been sent into my father's basement and had come out changed, broken, silent. How many Peters were there? How many quiet, damaged children had my father touched? How many families had trusted him with their sons, believing he was helping them, never knowing the truth? The police will find him, I said. They'll find all of them, and they'll finally know that someone saw them. Someone believed them. Daniel wiped his face with the back of his hand. What happens now? I don't know. The police are searching the house tomorrow. They'll go through everything. His papers, his files, the basement. If there's more evidence, they'll find it. And then the truth comes out. The newspapers will cover it. People will talk. Our name will be connected to this forever. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I did not expect. Good. I looked at him in surprise. I mean it, he continued, his voice growing steadier. Let people know. Let them see what kind of man Lawrence Brooks really was. Let his legacy be the truth, not the lie we've all been protecting. Maybe if people know what happened, it will stop someone else from doing the same thing. Maybe some other child will be saved because we finally spoke up. I felt a surge of pride then, painful and bittersweet, but real. My son, who had every reason to hide, who had every right to protect himself, was choosing courage instead. When the police search the house, I want to be there, Daniel said. I want to see what they find. I need to know the full truth, even if it destroys me. It won't destroy you, I said firmly. You've already survived the worst of it. You survived him. Everything after this is just cleanup. He almost smiled. Almost. We talked until the sun began to set. We talked about things we had never spoken of before. The way my mother used to hum too loudly whenever my father was in a bad mood, as if sound could create a barrier between us and his anger. The way my brother James had left for college at 17 and never came back for holidays. The way Thomas had always smelled like whiskey and desperation, even when he was sober. We talked about the house itself, the way certain rooms always felt cold, even in summer. The way the basement door never quite closed properly, as if something inside was always trying to push its way out. The way we had all learned to walk quietly on the floors above it, careful not to make noise, careful not to draw attention. I want to tear it down, Daniel said suddenly. After the police are done, after they've taken everything they need, I want to demolish that house, every wall, every floorboard, every stone in that basement. I want to erase it from the earth. What about your family? Where will you live? Somewhere else. Anywhere else. We'll start over. In a place that doesn't have ghosts in every corner. I thought about that. About the idea of starting over. I was 72 years old. Most people my age spent their time looking backward, sorting through memories, deciding what to keep and what to let go. But I had spent my entire life looking backward, and it had gotten me nowhere. Maybe it was time to look forward instead. I want to find them, I said. The other boys. If the police can identify them, I want to meet them. I want to tell them I'm sorry, that I should have known, that I should have stopped it. Daniel looked at me with something like understanding. They might not want to hear from you, Mom. They might blame you as much as they blame him. I know, but I need to try. I need them to know that someone from that family finally sees them, finally acknowledges what was done to them. He nodded. Then we'll do it together. Whatever comes next, we face it together. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Together. That night, after Daniel left, I sat alone in my living room with all the lights on. I had always been afraid of the dark. As a child, I had believed there were monsters hiding in shadows. As an adult, I had learned that monsters do not hide in shadows. They sit at dinner tables. They wear respectable suits. They shake hands and smile and convince the world that they are good men. And the real darkness is not what we cannot see. It is what we choose not to look at. I thought about my students, all those children I had taught to see beauty in the world, to notice light and color and shape. I had told them that art was about paying attention, about looking closely at things others overlooked, but I had spent my entire life teaching people to see, while refusing to see the most important thing of all, the truth that was right in front of me. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled down an old photo album. I opened it slowly, carefully, as if the pages might crumble in my hands. There were pictures of Daniel as a baby, as a toddler, as a young boy standing in front of that house, smiling at the camera. But when I looked closely, really looked, I could see it now. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. The way he stood slightly apart from my father, even in family portraits. The way his small hands were always clenched into fists at his sides. The signs had been there all along. I had just chosen not to see them. I closed the album and held it against my chest. I thought about all the years I had wasted, all the silence I had maintained, all the questions I had never asked. But I also thought about tomorrow, about the police searching that house, about the truth finally coming into the light, about the possibility, however small, that something good might come from all this pain. And I made myself a promise I should have made 40 years ago. I would never look away again, no matter how painful the truth was, no matter how much easier it would be to stay silent. I would see, and I would speak, and I would do whatever I could to make sure that no other child ever suffered the way my son had suffered, the way those other boys had suffered, the way I had let them all suffer by choosing silence over courage. That night, I finally slept without dreaming, and when I woke the next morning, I felt something I had not felt in decades. Purpose. The police arrived at the Savannah house at 8 o'clock Monday morning. Daniel called me from the driveway. I could hear voices in the background, the static crackle of police radios, the sound of car doors closing. "They're here," he said. "I'm letting them in now. Do you want me to come?" There was a pause. I heard him breathing, thinking. "Yes, I think I need you here." I drove the 40 minutes to Savannah with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The morning was gray and cold. Fog hung low over the marshes, turning the landscape into something ghostly and unreal. When I arrived, there were 3 police cars parked in the circular driveway. The house loomed above them, all dark brick and tall windows and iron gates. It had always looked imposing, grand. Now it just looked haunted. Daniel was standing on the front steps with his wife Amanda. She was holding his arm, her face pale and drawn. When she saw me, she came down the steps and embraced me without saying a word. She smelled like lavender and fear. "The children are at my mother's," she whispered. "I didn't want them here for this." I nodded. That was wise. Charlie did not need to see what was about to happen. None of them did. The same 2 detectives from yesterday were there, along with several uniformed officers and 2 people in plain clothes carrying large cases of equipment. The woman detective approached me with that same careful kindness in her eyes. "Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming. We're going to do a thorough search of the property, with particular focus on the basement and your father's personal office. We have a warrant that covers all structures on the property, including any outbuildings or storage areas. There's a shed behind the house," Daniel said quietly, "and a small guest cottage near the back of the property. My grandfather used it as a study sometimes." The detective made a note. "We'll search those as well. This may take several hours. You're welcome to wait inside, but I need to ask that you don't touch anything or enter any rooms we're actively searching." We waited in the front parlor, the room where my mother used to serve tea. The walls were still covered with family portraits. My grandfather in his military uniform, my grandmother in her wedding dress, my father as a young man, handsome and confident, with no hint of the darkness inside him. I wanted to tear them all down, to rip them from the walls and burn them in the yard. But I sat perfectly still on the antique sofa and listened to the sound of footsteps moving through the house above us, opening doors, opening drawers, opening all the secrets we had kept locked away for so long. Amanda made coffee that no one drank. Daniel paced back and forth in front of the fireplace. I watched the grandfather clock in the corner tick away the minutes, each one feeling like an eternity. After 2 hours, the male detective came downstairs. His expression was grim. "We found some items in the basement, documents, photographs, another camera." He looked at Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you again. Did you know these items were here?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "I never went through my grandfather's things after he died. I couldn't. I put everything in storage boxes and left them down there. I haven't been in that basement in years." The detective studied him for a moment, then nodded. "We're going to need to take several boxes of evidence. We've also found what appears to be a journal. It's going to take time to process everything, but from what I've seen so far, this is extensive. Your father documented his activities in significant detail." I felt my stomach turn. "A journal?" "Yes, ma'am. It appears to span several decades, from the early 1960s through the late 90s. 35 years. 35 years of documenting what he did to children in that basement. 35 years of keeping a record, as if it were research, as if it were something worth preserving. What kind of man does that? What kind of monster is so proud of his cruelty that he writes it down?" "Are there names?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "In the journal, are there names of the other children?" The detective glanced at his partner, who had just entered the room. She nodded slightly. "Yes," he said. "There are names, dates, details about each session." "It appears your father viewed this as a form of mentorship. He has notes about each boy's progress, their weaknesses, how they responded to his methods." Daniel made a sound I had never heard before, something between a sob and a growl. He turned away from us, his shoulders shaking. Amanda went to him, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Don't, please, I just need a minute." The woman detective stepped forward. "Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Brooks, I know this is incredibly difficult, but I want you to understand something. What we're finding here is going to help us identify victims. It's going to give us the evidence we need to contact families, to let people know that what happened to them was real and documented and not their fault. Your father kept records because he believed he was untouchable. That arrogance is going to be what brings justice to the people he hurt. Justice, Daniel said bitterly. He's dead. How is there justice when he's dead? Because the truth matters, she said gently. Because the people he hurt deserve to know they weren't alone. That someone finally saw what was done to them. That matters more than you might think. We stayed while they worked. We watched them carry box after box out of the house. Files, photographs, the journal, sealed in an evidence bag. The second camera, older than the first, its film cartridge still intact. How many more recordings were there? How many more children would we find frozen on film, sitting in that chair, trying not to cry? By late afternoon, they moved to the guest cottage. Daniel and I walked out there with them. The building was small, just 2 rooms and a bathroom. My father had used it as a private study, a place where he could work without interruption. Or so he had told us. Inside, the front room looked ordinary. A desk, bookshelves, a leather chair. But when the officers moved to the back room, they stopped. "Mr. Brooks," the male detective called. "I need you to see this." Daniel and I walked to the doorway. The back room was dark, with heavy curtains covering the single window. When the detective turned on the light, we saw it. The walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all young boys, all between the ages of 5 and 15. Some of the photos were formal portraits. Others were candid shots, taken at parks or schools or baseball games. And beneath each photograph was a small brass plaque with a name and a date. I felt the room spin. I reached for the doorframe to steady myself. "These are trophies," the detective said quietly. He was keeping trophies. Daniel walked slowly into the room. He moved from photograph to photograph, reading the names aloud. Peter Lawson, 1978. Michael Chen, 1982. David Foster, 1985. Christopher Wells, 1991. His voice was shaking. "There are so many. Mom, there are so many." I could not move. I could not breathe. I stood in that doorway and looked at all those faces, all those boys, all those children whose parents had trusted my father, who had sent their sons to him believing he would help them, believing he would make them better, and he had destroyed them instead. "We're going to photograph everything," the woman detective said. "And then we're going to contact every family we can identify. It's going to take time, but we will reach them. They'll know the truth." Daniel turned to look at me. His face was wet with tears, but his expression was something I had never seen before. Not grief, not shame, determination. "I want to help," he said. "When you start contacting them, I want to be part of it. I want to tell them that I was one of them, that I survived, that they're not alone." The detective looked at him with deep respect. "That's very brave, Mr. Brooks. And yes, when the time comes, we'll absolutely involve you if that's what you want." They worked until dark, photographing every image, cataloging every name, carefully removing the plaques and sealing them as evidence. When they finally left, Daniel and I stood alone in that cottage, in that room, surrounded by empty walls where all those faces had been. "I can't live here anymore," Daniel said. "Not even for another night. I'm taking my family to a hotel. And then I'm calling a demolition company. I want this place gone, Mom. Every board, every stone. I want it erased." "I understand," I said. "But Daniel, before you do that, I think you should let the families know. Some of them might want to see the house, to see where it happened, to understand." He looked at me with something like surprise. "Why would they want that?" "Because sometimes seeing the place where something terrible happened helps you understand that it wasn't your fault, that it was the place that was wrong, not you. That's what you've been trying to do all these years by living here, isn't it? Trying to prove the house didn't define you?" He closed his eyes and nodded slowly. "Maybe they need to do that too." "Maybe," I said. "So let's give them the chance. Let's let them see it. Let them walk through it. Let them reclaim it. And then, when they're ready, we'll tear it down together." Daniel reached for my hand. We stood there in the growing darkness, holding on to each other. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not yet, but something close to it. The possibility of peace. The knowledge that we were finally doing the right thing, even though it was 40 years too late. We locked the cottage and walked back to the main house. The fog had rolled in from the marsh, thick and gray, turning everything soft and indistinct, but I could still see the outline of the house rising above us, dark against the darkening sky. Tomorrow, this would all be news. Tomorrow, people would know. Tomorrow, the Brooks name would be forever changed. But tonight, Daniel and I sat together on the front steps of that terrible house, and we simply existed in the truth, not hiding from it, not running from it, just sitting with it, letting it be what it was. And somewhere, in some other city, in some other home, there was a man who had once been a boy named Peter, or Michael, or David, or Christopher, a man who had carried a secret his whole life, a man who would soon receive a phone call that would change everything, a phone call that would finally tell him, "We see you, we believe you, you are not alone," and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to begin healing what my father had broken. The story broke 3 days later. I woke to the sound of my phone ringing before dawn. It was Daniel. "It's on the news," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes from shock. "National news. They're calling it one of the largest cases of documented child abuse in the state's history." I turned on the television. There it was, the house on the screen. My father's photograph from 1975, the one where he was shaking hands with the governor. And then the headline, stark and brutal. "Respected attorneys, decades of abuse uncovered through grandson's discovery." They did not use my father's name in the headline. They did not need to. Anyone who had lived in Savannah knew exactly who they were talking about. I watched as a reporter stood in front of the house, speaking into a microphone. Behind her, I could see the police tape still wrapped around the property. The fog from the marsh made everything look gray and ghostly. Authorities say Lawrence Brooks, a prominent attorney who died in 2006, may have abused dozens of children over a 30-year period. The discovery was made after Brooks's grandson found a camera containing disturbing footage in the family's basement. Police are now working to identify and contact potential victims using detailed records Brooks kept of his crimes. The screen changed. Now it showed the woman detective from the investigation. She was speaking at a press conference. "We want to be clear that this investigation is ongoing. We have identified 23 potential victims so far, and we believe there may be more. We are asking anyone who had contact with Lawrence Brooks, particularly parents who may have sent their children to him for mentoring or discipline, to please contact our tip line. All information will be kept confidential." 23 boys whose names were in my father's journal. 23 families who would soon receive that phone call. My phone rang again, and again, and again. Reporters, old friends, former colleagues, people I had not spoken to in years, all calling to ask the same questions. Did you know? How could you not know? What kind of mother allows this to happen to her own son? I stopped answering after the first dozen calls. I sat in my kitchen with the phone ringing endlessly beside me, and I stared at my hands. These hands that had held paintbrushes and corrected homework and folded laundry and done 1,000 ordinary things, while my son suffered in silence just one floor below. By afternoon, there were reporters outside my house. 3 vans with satellite dishes, cameras pointed at my front door. I closed all the curtains and sat in the darkness, listening to them call my name. "Mrs. Brooks, just a few questions. Did you have any knowledge of your father's activities?" I did not answer. I could not answer, because the truth was too complicated for a soundbite. The truth was that I had known and not known. I had sensed something wrong and chosen not to look. I had protected myself by staying willfully blind, and no one would understand that. No one would forgive it. I did not even forgive it myself. My phone rang again. This time it was Amanda, Daniel's wife. "Mom, don't watch the news," she said immediately. "Please, just turn it off." "What happened?" She hesitated. "They found Daniel's name. Someone leaked it to the press. They're saying he was the first victim. They have reporters outside our hotel. Charlie is asking questions. He wants to know why people are calling his father a victim. He wants to know what his great-grandfather did." My heart broke. "Oh, Amanda, I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," she said, but her voice was tight, strained. "Daniel wants to make a statement. The police advised against it. but he says he needs to. He says if he doesn't control the narrative, someone else will. What's he going to say? The truth. All of it. He's going to tell people what happened to him, what he saw, what he remembers. He thinks it will help the other victims come forward. I thought about that. About my son standing in front of cameras and reporters, exposing the most painful parts of his life for the world to see. About him choosing courage when it would be so much easier to hide. Tell him I'm proud of him, I said quietly. Tell him that whatever he decides to do, I support him. I will. But Mom, you need to prepare yourself. Once he speaks, they're going to come after you harder. They're going to ask why you didn't protect him, why you didn't know. They're going to make you into a villain. Maybe I am one, I said. No. Her voice was firm now, strong. You were a victim too. Maybe not in the same way, but you were still trapped in that house, under that man's control. You were conditioned to be silent. That doesn't make you guilty. That makes you a survivor. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to accept that absolution, but I could not. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That evening, Daniel held a press conference. I watched it on television, sitting in my darkened living room, holding a pillow against my chest like armor. He looked tired, older than his 49 years, but he stood straight at the podium with Amanda beside him, and he spoke clearly and calmly into the microphone. My name is Daniel Brooks. I am the grandson of Lawrence Brooks, and I am one of his victims. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Daniel held up his hand for silence. I was 5 years old the first time my grandfather took me to the basement of his home. He told me he was going to teach me how to be a man, how to be strong, how to endure pain without crying. For 7 years, he subjected me to physical punishment that he called discipline. He recorded these sessions on camera. He documented them in journals. He believed he was helping me. Daniel's voice cracked slightly, but he continued. I am speaking today because I want the other victims to know that they are not alone, that what happened to them was not their fault, that they did nothing wrong. My grandfather was a predator who used his position of authority and trust to harm children. He manipulated their parents into believing he was helping them. He convinced everyone, including his own family, that he was a good man. He paused, took a breath. I also want to address the questions about my mother and grandmother, about what they knew. The truth is complicated. My grandmother is no longer alive to speak for herself, but I believe she was also a victim of my grandfather's control. She was taught, as many women of her generation were, that a wife's duty was to support her husband without question. That challenging male authority was dangerous. She made the wrong choice by staying silent. But I do not believe she was evil. I believe she was afraid. He looked directly at the camera then, and I knew he was speaking to me. As for my mother, Evelyn Brooks, I want to be clear. She did not know the full extent of what was happening. She suspected something was wrong, but my grandfather was skilled at hiding his abuse. He was charming, respected, convincing. When she finally learned the truth, she immediately contacted the police. She chose justice over family loyalty. She chose truth over comfort. And she did what no one else in our family had the courage to do for 40 years. She looked at the evidence, and she refused to look away. Tears were streaming down my face now. I pressed the pillow harder against my chest, trying to hold myself together. I know there will be people who blame her, Daniel continued, who say she should have known, should have done more. And I understand that anger, but I want those people to understand something. My grandfather's greatest skill was making people doubt their own perceptions, making them question what they saw and heard, making them believe that silence was kindness. My mother spent her entire life under that influence. The fact that she finally broke free, that she finally chose truth, is not a small thing. It is everything. He stepped back from the podium. The reporters erupted with questions, but Daniel did not answer them. He simply took Amanda's hand, and they walked away together. I sat in the darkness of my living room and wept, not quietly, not politely. I wept the way I should have wept 40 years ago, loudly, desperately, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and there were no tears left inside me. When I finally stopped, I felt empty, hollowed out, but also strangely lighter, as if something heavy I had been carrying for decades had finally been set down. My phone rang. I answered it this time. It was the woman detective. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm calling to let you know that we've made contact with 16 of the 23 victims we've identified so far. Most of them are willing to speak with us. Some have expressed interest in meeting you and your son when they're ready. They want to meet us?" I could not hide my surprise. Not all of them, but some do. They want to know that someone from the family acknowledges what happened to them, that someone sees them. Your son's statement today helped. Several victims called our tip line after seeing it. They said hearing him speak gave them the courage to come forward. I closed my eyes. What happens now? We continue the investigation. We document everything. We build a case for the historical record, even though the perpetrator is deceased, and we offer support to the victims, counseling, resources, whatever they need to heal. And the house? Your son can do whatever he wants with it once we've completed our evidence collection. We should be finished within the week. After she hung up, I sat for a long time in the silence. Then I did something I had not done in years. I went to my studio, the small spare bedroom where I kept my paints and canvases and all the art supplies I had not touched since I retired from teaching. I pulled out a blank canvas, large, white, empty, and I began to paint. I did not plan what I was painting. I simply let my hands move, let the colors flow, let the image emerge from somewhere deep inside me that I had kept locked away. I painted the house, the Savannah house, but not as it looked in photographs, grand and imposing and beautiful. I painted it the way it felt, dark, heavy, suffocating, with shadows pouring out of the windows like smoke, with the basement door standing open, revealing nothing but blackness inside. And in front of the house, I painted a small figure, a boy, alone, waiting. I worked through the night, not stopping until the sun began to rise and my back ached and my hands were covered in paint. When I finally stepped back to look at what I had created, I understood what it was. It was not a painting of the house. It was a painting of silence. Of all the years we had spent pretending everything was fine. Of all the children who had waited for someone to see them, to save them, to believe them. And I knew what I needed to do. I needed to find those children, the ones who were now men, the ones who had carried this secret for decades, the ones who thought no one would ever believe them. I needed to look them in the eyes and say the words I should have said 40 years ago. I see you. I believe you. I am sorry. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the beginning of something. Not redemption. I did not deserve redemption. But perhaps, in some small way, it would be a start toward healing. For them, for Daniel, and maybe eventually, for me. The first victim who agreed to meet me was named Michael Chen. He was 51 years old. He lived in Atlanta. He worked as a pharmacist. He had a wife and 2 daughters. He had never told anyone what happened to him until the police called. We met at a small coffee shop halfway between our cities. Neutral ground. The detective who had been working with him offered to be there, but Michael said no. He wanted to do this alone. I arrived early and sat at a table near the back, away from the windows. I ordered tea that I did not drink. I watched the door and tried to prepare myself for what I would say. But there were no words adequate for this moment, no script for facing the truth of your own failure. When Michael walked in, I recognized him immediately from the photograph on my father's wall. The same dark eyes, the same serious expression. But the boy in the photograph had been 9 years old, small and frightened. The man walking toward me was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray streaking through his hair. Time had changed him, but I could still see the boy underneath. He sat down across from me without offering his hand. We looked at each other in silence for a long moment. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," I said finally. My voice was barely above a whisper. He nodded. I wasn't sure I would. My wife thought it was a bad idea. She said I don't owe you anything, that I don't need closure from you or your family. She's right. You don't. But I came anyway. He folded his hands on the table. They were steady, strong. "Do you want to know why?" "Yes, because I need to look you in the eye and tell you what your father did to me, not to a detective, not to a therapist, to someone from his family, someone who lived in that house while it was happening." I felt my throat tighten, but I nodded. "I'm listening." Michael took a breath. My father worked at your father's law firm. He was an associate, young, ambitious, desperate to impress the senior partners. I was struggling in school, getting into fights. My mother said I had too much anger. My father was embarrassed by me. He thought I was making him look bad at work. He paused. His jaw tightened. One day, my father came home and told me Mr. Brooks had offered to help, that he mentored young boys, that he had a reputation for turning troubled children into responsible young men. My parents were so grateful. They thought they were giving me an opportunity, a chance to learn from someone important. How many times did you go there? I asked quietly. 6. Once a week for 6 weeks during the summer of 1982. My mother would drive me to that house every Saturday morning. She would drop me off at 9 and pick me up at noon. She thought I was getting tutoring, life lessons. She had no idea. What happened in those 3 hours? Michael's eyes met mine. They were hard, cold. Your father would take me down to the basement. He would tell me to sit in the chair. And then he would explain, very calmly, very rationally, why I needed to be corrected, why my anger was weakness, why crying was shameful, why pain was the only teacher that truly worked. He stopped, swallowed hard, and then he would hit me, with a belt, with a wooden paddle, with his hands. He would hit me until I stopped crying, until I stopped flinching, until I sat perfectly still and silent, no matter how much it hurt. And he would tell me that this was love, that my parents loved me enough to send me to him, that he loved me enough to make me better. I felt tears running down my face, but I did not wipe them away. I did not deserve the comfort of hiding my grief. After the 6th session, I told my parents I didn't want to go back. They asked why. I said I didn't like it. They said I didn't have to like it. I just had to do it. They said Mr. Brooks was doing us a favor, that we should be grateful. But you didn't go back, I said. No. I locked myself in my room that Saturday morning. I screamed. I threw things. I told them if they made me go, I would run away. My mother cried. My father was furious, but they didn't make me go, and they never asked me why I was so desperate to avoid it. He leaned forward slightly. Do you understand what that did to me, Mrs. Brooks? Knowing that something terrible was happening to me, but not having the words to explain it? Knowing that the adults in my life thought it was good for me? That they trusted him more than they trusted my fear? Yes, I whispered. I understand. Because I did the same thing to my own son. Michael studied my face for a long moment. Your son spoke at that press conference. He defended you. He's kinder than I deserve. Maybe. Or maybe he understands something the rest of us are still learning. That the people who hurt us aren't always the people we expect. And the people who fail to protect us aren't always monsters. Sometimes they're just human, flawed, manipulated, afraid. I looked down at my hands. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't. But it makes it understandable. He paused. I'm not here to forgive you, Mrs. Brooks. I'm not ready for that. Maybe I'll never be ready. But I am here to tell you that I see you trying. I see you choosing truth, even though it costs you everything. And that matters. It doesn't erase the past, but it matters. What can I do? I asked. To help you. To help any of them. There has to be something. Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Tell our stories. When people ask you what happened, don't hide. Don't minimize it. Tell them exactly what your father did. Use our names if we give you permission. Make sure the world knows that respectable men can be monsters, that abuse doesn't always look like what people expect, that children can be hurt in houses that look perfect from the outside. I will, I said. I promise. He nodded slowly. Then he stood up. I should go. My wife is waiting in the car. She didn't want me to come in alone, but I needed to do this by myself. Thank you, I said, for giving me this chance, for letting me hear you. He looked at me one more time. Your son was right about one thing. You did choose truth over comfort. That's more than most people in your position would do. So maybe there's hope for you yet, Mrs. Brooks. Maybe there's hope for all of us. He walked out of the coffee shop, and I sat alone at that table for a long time afterward. I thought about what he had said, about telling their stories, about making sure the world knew, and I realized that was exactly what I needed to do, not just for Michael, but for all of them. For Peter and David and Christopher and all the others whose names I now knew. For the ones who could not speak. For the ones who were too afraid. For the ones who had not yet been found. Over the next 3 weeks, I met with 7 more victims. Some meetings were brief and painful, others lasted for hours. Some of the men were angry. They shouted. They wept. They told me I was complicit, that I should have known, that my ignorance was a choice. I listened to all of it. I did not defend myself. I did not make excuses. I simply bore witness to their pain, the way I should have done 40 years ago. Not all of them wanted to meet me. Some sent letters through their attorneys, telling me to stay away. Some simply refused all contact. I respected that. I understood it. Their healing did not require my presence. My need to apologize did not supersede their need to protect themselves. But the ones who did agree to meet me, the ones who looked me in the eye and shared their stories, gave me something I had not expected. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but a kind of truth that was deeper than guilt or shame. They showed me that survival is complicated, that healing is not linear, that some wounds never fully close, but that does not mean life cannot be good, cannot be meaningful, cannot be worth living. One man, David Foster, told me something I will never forget. He was 48. He had been in my father's basement when he was 11. He was a teacher now, working with at-risk youth. I spent 20 years trying to forget what happened to me, he said. I drank. I used drugs. I pushed away everyone who tried to love me. I thought I was broken beyond repair, but eventually I realized something. The abuse didn't define me. It shaped me, yes. It hurt me, yes, but it didn't define me. I got to decide who I became after that, and I decided to become someone who protects children, someone who sees them when they're hurting, someone who believes them when they speak. He looked at me with clear, steady eyes. Your father tried to break me, but I'm still here. I'm still whole. I'm still worthy. And knowing that you and your son are facing the truth, that you're not hiding anymore, that helps. It really does. Those words stayed with me. They became a kind of anchor when everything else felt uncertain. By the end of the month, the police had identified 31 victims in total. 31 boys who had sat in that chair. 31 families who had trusted my father. 31 lives that had been marked by his cruelty. The news coverage began to shift. At first, it had been sensational, shocking, focused on the horror of what my father had done. But as more victims came forward, as their stories were told with nuance and depth, the conversation changed. People began talking about institutional failures, about how respected men can hide in plain sight, about how communities protect their own, even when their own are predators, about how silence enables abuse to continue across generations. Daniel was interviewed by a national news program. He spoke calmly and clearly about his own experience, about the long-term effects of childhood trauma, about the importance of believing victims even when the perpetrator is dead. He ended the interview with words that made me cry. My mother could have stayed silent. She could have destroyed that camera and pretended she never saw it. She could have protected the family name and let my grandfather's reputation remain intact. But she didn't. She chose to face the truth, even though it cost her everything. That choice saved me, and I believe it will save others too. The reporter asked him if he had forgiven me. Daniel smiled sadly. Forgiveness is complicated. But I will say this. My mother is doing now what she couldn't do then. She's listening. She's witnessing. She's refusing to look away. And that's all any of us can ask. That when we finally understand the truth, we have the courage to act on it. That night, I sat in my studio and looked at the painting I had created. The dark house, the open basement door, the small waiting figure. And I realized the painting was not finished. I picked up my brush and added something new. A hand reaching toward the boy, not pulling him away, not saving him, just reaching, offering, present. Because that was all I could do now. Be present, bear witness, reach toward the pain I could not undo and say simply and honestly, I see you, I believe you, I am here. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something, and something, I was learning, was better than silence. The demolition of the house was scheduled for a cool morning in late November. 6 months had passed since Charlie found that camera in the basement. 6 months since the truth came into the light. Daniel had kept his promise. Before tearing the house down, he had reached out to every victim who could be contacted. He offered them the chance to see the property one last time, to walk through it, to reclaim it, to take back something that had been stolen from them. 14 men accepted the invitation. They arrived on a Saturday morning, some with family members, some alone. They ranged in age from 43 to 68. They came from different cities, different backgrounds, different lives, but they all shared one thing. They had all sat in that chair. They had all survived my father. And now, they were here to witness the end of the place where it happened. Daniel and I stood at the front gates as they arrived. We greeted each one by name. We shook hands. We looked them in the eyes. Some spoke to us. Others simply nodded and walked past. All of it was welcome. All of it was right. Michael Chen came with his 2 daughters. They were teenagers, tall and confident, and they stayed close to their father as he walked up the long driveway toward the house. David Foster came alone. He stood for a long time looking at the front door before he finally climbed the steps and went inside. Peter Lawson, the boy from Daniel's childhood memory, arrived in a wheelchair. He was 62 now, frail. His sister pushed him up the ramp Daniel had installed the week before. When Peter saw Daniel, he reached out his hand. Daniel took it, and the 2 men sat together on the front steps for almost an hour, talking quietly. I could not hear what they said, but I saw Daniel cry. I saw Peter cry. And when they finally stood, when Peter's sister helped him back into his chair, I saw something pass between them, an understanding, a shared truth that needed no words. For 3 hours, these men walked through the house. Some went to the basement, others could not. Some stood in the parlor where my mother had served tea and tried to reconcile the ordinary beauty of the room with the horror that had existed just 1 floor below. Others went to the guest cottage, to the room where my father had kept his photographs. The walls were bare now, but the ghosts remained. Daniel gave them all the same option. If they wanted to take something from the house, a brick, a piece of wood, anything at all, they could. Some did. Others preferred to leave with nothing. One man, Christopher Wells, took the basement door. He unscrewed it from its hinges himself, with Daniel's help. He said he was going to burn it in his backyard and scatter the ashes. He said his therapist told him it might help. A ritual of release. Another man took a stone from the foundation. He said he was going to throw it into the ocean. Let the water take it. Let it sink where it could never hurt anyone again. When they had all finished, when they had walked through every room and said whatever they needed to say, we gathered outside, all of us together. 14 survivors, Daniel, me, Amanda and the children, a few family members who had come for support. The demolition crew stood at a respectful distance, waiting. Daniel stepped forward. He had written something, but when he pulled the paper from his pocket, his hands were shaking too much to read it. He looked at me. I walked to his side and took the paper from him. I cleared my throat and began to read. To everyone gathered here today, to the men who survived what should never have been done to them, to the families who love them and support them, and to all the people who were hurt by the silence that protected my grandfather for far too long. I want to say this. What happened in this house was evil. It was cruel. It was wrong. And it was allowed to continue because people like my mother, like my grandmother, like everyone who suspected something but said nothing, chose comfort over courage. We chose to believe the man we knew, the respectable attorney, the community leader, the grandfather, instead of believing the pain we could sense but could not see. That failure belongs to us. That guilt is ours to carry, and no amount of apology can undo it. I paused. My voice was shaking now too, but I continued. But we can do this. We can stand here today and say, without qualification, without excuse, that we believe you, that what happened to you was real, that it was documented and witnessed and proven, that you are not alone, that you were never to blame, and that the man who hurt you will not be remembered as a good man. He will be remembered for exactly what he was, a predator who used power and respectability to hide his cruelty. That is his legacy now. Not success, not honor, just truth. I folded the paper and looked at the men standing before me. In a few minutes, this house will begin to come down. stone by stone, wall by wall, until there is nothing left but empty ground. And I hope that when you leave here today, you take something with you. Not trauma, not pain, but the knowledge that you survived, that you are strong, that you built lives and families and futures despite everything that was done to you. That is your legacy, and it is a legacy worth remembering. The silence that followed was deep and sacred. No one moved, no one spoke. Then Peter Lawson raised his hand. His voice, when he spoke, was thin and fragile, but clear. "I forgive you," he said, looking at me. "I forgive your mother, wherever she is. I forgive everyone who didn't know how to see what was right in front of them. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. And I can't have peace while I'm carrying hatred." Other men nodded. Some wiped their eyes. One man, I did not know his name, stepped forward and hugged Daniel, just wrapped his arms around him and held him while they both cried. And then, slowly, one by one, they began to leave, back to their cars, back to their lives, back to the world they had built beyond this place. When the last of them had gone, Daniel turned to the demolition crew and nodded. The first machine moved forward, its arm extended. Its claw closed around the corner of the house, and then, with a sound like thunder, the wall began to fall. We stood there all day, watching as the house was reduced to rubble, watching as the basement was filled in, watching as every trace of that terrible place disappeared into dust and memory. By evening, there was nothing left but a flat stretch of ground covered in broken stone and splintered wood. The machines had smoothed it over, leveled it, made it clean. Daniel stood at the edge of the property, looking at the empty space where the house had been. Charlie stood beside him, holding his hand. "What will you do with the land?" I asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm going to donate it to the city. I'm going to ask them to turn it into a park, a place for children to play, a place where people can gather and feel safe. I don't want the ground to stay empty. I want it to be full of life again, full of laughter, full of light." "That's beautiful," I said. "It's what should have been here all along." We drove home together that night. Amanda was driving. Charlie was asleep in the back seat. Daniel sat beside me, his head resting against the window, watching the dark landscape roll past. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For being brave, for choosing the truth, for not protecting him." I reached over and took his hand. "I'm sorry it took me so long." "I know, but you did it eventually, and that matters." We drove the rest of the way in silence. When Amanda pulled up in front of my house, Daniel walked me to the door. He hugged me tightly before he left. "I love you, Mom. I love you too." I stood on my porch and watched them drive away. Then I went inside and sat in my studio. I looked at the painting on the easel, the dark house, the reaching hand, and I realized I had one more thing to add. I picked up my brush and began to paint again. This time, I added figures, small ones, children, playing in an open field where the house had been, running, laughing, free. It was not a painting of what was, it was a painting of what could be. When I finally set down my brush, it was nearly midnight. I was exhausted. My back ached, my hands were stiff, but I felt something I had not felt in 40 years. Peace. Not complete peace, not perfect peace. There were still wounds that would never fully heal, still guilt that would never fully fade, still nights when I would wake up wondering what I could have done differently. But there was also this, the knowledge that I had finally told the truth, that I had looked at the darkest parts of my life and my family and refused to look away, that I had listened to the men who had been hurt and believed them, that I had stood beside my son while he healed, and that was something. That was enough to build on. I walked to my bedroom and lay down. I did not turn on the light. I simply lay there in the darkness, listening to the silence. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, the silence did not feel heavy. It did not feel suffocating. It felt like rest. I thought about all the people who had been part of this story, the survivors who had shown such courage, Daniel, who had chosen truth over shame, Amanda and Charlie and all the families who had been touched by this pain, Marcus, the young man who had made the first call, the detectives who had taken it seriously, all the people who had refused to let this truth stay buried. And I thought about the future, about the park that would once stand where that house had been, about children playing on ground that had once held so much darkness, about light reclaiming space from shadow. My name is Evelyn Brooks. I am 72 years old. For 43 years, I taught children to see beauty in the world, but I had to learn the hardest lesson of all myself, that sometimes the most beautiful thing we can do is tell the truth, even when it costs us everything, even when it breaks us, even when we are 40 years too late. Because the truth does not erase the past, but it does give us a chance to build something better in the present, something honest, something real. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. If my story helps even one person find the courage to speak, if it helps even one mother open her eyes, if it helps even one child know they are believed, then it was worth it, all of it.